Breaking out of prison sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster, right? Ocean's 11 meets Shawshank Redemption with a dash of MacGyver. But here's the thing. Some real-life prison escapes were so absolutely batshit insane that if you pitched them as a movie script, producers would laugh you out of the room for being too unrealistic. We're talking about prisoners who built helicopters, surfed through sewage systems, and literally mailed themselves to freedom, and somehow these mad lads actually pulled it off. The craziest part? These weren't masterminds with engineering degrees and unlimited resources. Most of these were regular criminals who just refused to accept that bars, walls, and armed guards were going to keep them locked up. Some spent decades planning, others improvised on the spot. All of them had absolutely massive balls and zero F-yucks to give about the consequences of failure. But before we dive into this spiral of criminal genius and institutional embarrassment, if you enjoy stories that make you question whether anything is actually secure, smash that subscribe button. Drop a like if you're glad you're not a prison guard who has to explain how someone escaped using a wooden gun. And comment below, which of these escapes do you think was the most insane? Choose your favorite act of defiance. Now let's get into it. Let's kick things off with probably the most famous prison escape in American history, Alcatraz, 1962. Now, if you don't know, Alcatraz was supposed to be the prison that nobody could escape from. It's on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing cold water with currents that could rip you apart like a cosmic blender. The prison itself was a fortress. Guard towers everywhere. Regular head counts. Bars so thick you'd need a lightsaber to cut through them. The authorities were so confident that they literally called it the Rock and said it was escape-proof. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Enter Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. These three weren't criminal masterminds or evil geniuses. They were bank robbers. Regular dudes who just happened to be really good at not staying in jail. Frank Morris had an IQ of 133, which is pretty damn high, but still. These guys didn't have engineering degrees or military training. What they had was time, patience, and an absolute refusal to die in a concrete box. So here's what these absolute legends did. First, they noticed that the walls of their cells were slowly deteriorating. The salt air from the bay was eating away at the concrete like acid on flesh. So they started digging. With what, you ask? Spoons. Literal cafeteria spoons that they sharpened into makeshift chisels. They also used a drill motor that someone had conveniently left lying around, because apparently Alcatraz security was about as tight as a wet paper bag. But here's where it gets beautiful. They couldn't just dig during the day because, guards and stuff. So they did it at night, for months. Every single night they'd scrape away at that concrete, making a hole big enough to crawl through. And to hide the noise, they had another inmate play accordion during music hour. Yes, really. An accordion was the key to one of history's greatest prison escapes. Let that sink in. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but guards check cells at night, right? Correct. That's where the dummy heads come in. These guys made fake heads out of soap, toilet paper, and real human hair that they collected from the barbershop. They painted them with flesh-colored paint and then put them in their beds to make it look like they were sleeping. And it fucking worked. The guards walked by, saw what they thought were sleeping prisoners, and kept on walking. Once they had their holes dug, they crawled through the ventilation system to the top of the cell block. There, they had been secretly building a raft and life jackets out of stolen raincoats. Over 50 raincoats, all stitched together with stolen glue and tools. They even made a small accordion-like device to inflate the raft. The accordion strikes again. On the night of June 11th, 1962, they executed their plan. They stuffed the dummy heads in their beds, crawled through the holes, made their way to the roof, climbed down the building, and launched their raft into the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. And then they vanished. The FBI searched for years. They never found the bodies. They never found definitive proof that the men died. Some personal items washed up on shore, which the FBI claimed proved they drowned. But here's the kicker. In 2013, the Anglin family received a letter allegedly from John Anglin, claiming he and his brother survived and lived into their 80s. The FBI investigated. They couldn't prove it was real, but they couldn't prove it was fake either. Three guys with spoons and raincoats possibly escaped from America's most secure prison and were never seen again. The government officially claims they drowned, but no bodies were ever found. And that's what makes this escape so insane. We still don't know for sure what happened. If you think that's crazy, buckle up, because we're about to meet a French pilot who decided that prison bars were merely a suggestion. Meet Pascal Payet, a French armed robber who looked at prison security and decided helicopters were the answer. Not once, not twice, but 3 farrowing times. This man escaped from prison via helicopter 3 times and helped break out other prisoners another time. He basically turned prison breaks into his part-time hobby. The first escape happened in 2001. Payet was being held in a prison in the south of France, serving a 30-year sentence for murder and armed robbery. Pretty standard stuff for a career criminal. But Payet wasn't about that prison life. So he had some friends hijack a helicopter, fly it directly to the prison yard, hover over the exercise area, and throw down a rope ladder. And Payet just climbed up, in broad daylight, while guards watched in absolute confusion. The helicopter pilot, who was being held at gunpoint by Payet's accomplices, later said it was the most terrifying experience of his life. But it worked. Payet was gone before authorities could even process what was happening. He was free for 2 years before being recaptured in 2003. You'd think after an escape like that, prisons would maybe beef up their helicopter defenses, right? Wrong. Because in 2007, while awaiting trial for his first escape, Payet organized another helicopter prison break. Except this time, he wasn't escaping. He was breaking other people out. His accomplices hijacked another helicopter, flew to Grasse prison, landed on the roof, used explosives and angle grinders to cut through the bars, and extracted 3 prisoners. The whole operation took about 5 minutes. By the time guards realized what was happening, the helicopter was already gone. And then, the absolute madman did it again in 2007 for his own escape. Same method. Hijacked helicopter, flew to the prison, landed on the roof, grabbed Payet, disappeared into the sky. At this point, the French prison system was probably wondering if they should just install SAM missile batteries on the roofs. Payet was eventually recaptured in Spain in 2007 and extradited back to France. This time, authorities weren't taking chances. He was placed in solitary confinement in a maximum security facility with specific anti-helicopter measures. No more roof access, no more outdoor exercise time, just concrete and isolation. But here's what makes Pascal Payet's story so insane. He proved that with enough planning and balls, even the most secure prisons are vulnerable. Helicopters aren't exactly subtle. They're loud, they're visible, and they require extensive coordination. And yet, Payet pulled it off multiple times. He embarrassed the entire French prison system and became a legend in the criminal underworld. The man is currently serving life in prison with no possibility of parole until 2033. And you can bet your ass they're watching the skies. Helicopters are cool and all, but what if you didn't have access to aircraft? What if all you had was determination and an inhuman tolerance for disgusting conditions? September 25th, 1983. The Maze Prison in Northern Ireland. This wasn't just any prison. This was a highly secure facility designed specifically to hold members of the IRA and other paramilitary groups during the Troubles. It had armed guards, surveillance systems, and multiple layers of security. It was basically Ireland's version of Alcatraz. And then 38 IRA prisoners escaped in a single day. Not one dude digging a tunnel over 20 years. 38 grown-ass men, all at once, in broad daylight. It remains the largest prison escape in British history and one of the largest in Europe. So how did they do it? Planning. Lots and lots of planning. And a healthy dose of violence. The prisoners had been secretly preparing for months. They smuggled in knives, made from materials they found in the prison workshop. They studied guard routines. They mapped out every single security checkpoint. And then, on that Sunday afternoon, they struck. It started in H7, one of the prison blocks. The prisoners overpowered the guards, tied them up, and stole their uniforms. They moved systematically through the block, taking control of each section. Some guards were stabbed. Others were threatened into compliance. The prisoners were not fighting around. Here's where it gets clever. They hijacked a food delivery truck that was inside the prison. They loaded it up with prisoners disguised as guards and workers. The driver, who was held at knife point, drove them to the main gate. The guards at the gate, seeing what they thought was a normal delivery truck with guards inside, opened the gate, and they just drove out. 38 prisoners in a hijacked truck drove straight through the front gate of one of Britain's most secure prisons. By the time authorities realized what happened, the prisoners had scattered. Some hijacked cars, others ran into nearby neighborhoods. A few disappeared into the countryside. The response was immediate and massive. The British Army was mobilized. Police set up roadblocks across Northern Ireland. Helicopters scoured the area. And they did recapture 19 of the escapees within a few days. But 19 others got away. Some were never recaptured. Others lived as fugitives for years before being caught. One prisoner, Brendan McFarlane, evaded capture for 4 years. Another, Dermot Finucane, was never caught and is believed to have fled to the United States. The escape was a massive embarrassment for the British government and became a propaganda victory for the IRA. What makes the Maze prison escape so insane is the sheer scale and coordination. This wasn't one guy with a clever plan. This was 38 men working together, overpowering dozens of guards, hijacking vehicles, and escaping from a maximum security facility. The level of organization required is mind-boggling, and the fact that half of them succeeded in staying free is even crazier. One guard later described it as like a scene from a war movie. And honestly, that's exactly what it was. Mass escapes are impressive, but sometimes the craziest escapes are the ones that involve just one person, an impossible plan, and absolute insanity. John Dillinger was America's most famous bank robber during the Great Depression, and he was also an escape artist who made Houdini look like an amateur. This man broke out of prison multiple times using methods so ridiculous that you'd think they were made up. But nope, all real. The most famous escape happened in March 1934 from the Crown Point jail in Indiana, which was considered escape-proof. Dillinger was being held there awaiting trial for murder. The jail was heavily guarded. The sheriff was so confident in the security that he posed for photos with Dillinger, arm around him, grinning like they were buddies. That photo would later become one of the most embarrassing images in law enforcement history. So how did Dillinger escape? With a wooden gun? Yes. A F-Morder-gunning wooden gun. He carved it from a washboard, blackened it with shoe polish to make it look real, and used it to bluff his way out of the jail. He held the fake gun on guards who believed it was real, locked them in cells, stole 2 actual guns and some bullets, and then casually walked out the front door. But it gets better. He didn't just walk out. He stole the sheriff's brand new Ford V8 and drove it across state lines, which made it a federal crime and brought the FBI into the manhunt. J. Edgar Hoover was so pissed off that he made Dillinger public enemy number 1 and dedicated enormous resources to hunting him down. The wooden gun escape is legendary because of how simple and ballsy it was. Dillinger didn't tunnel through walls or build elaborate disguises. He just carved a fake gun, convinced guards it was real, and walked out like he owned the place. It's the criminal equivalent of "I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me," except Dillinger actually followed through. Now, that wasn't Dillinger's only escape. Earlier in his career, in September 1933, he was arrested in Ohio. His gang broke him out by sneaking guns into the prison and staging a violent escape that left several people injured. Dillinger repaid the favor by later breaking his gang members out of an Indiana prison using smuggled weapons and a detailed plan that involved cutting through barbed wire and outrunning guards. Dillinger's escapes were so frequent and embarrassing that law enforcement started calling him Jackrabbit because he was impossible to keep caged. Banks feared him, cops hated him, the public loved him. During the Depression, when people were losing their homes and banks were foreclosing on farms, Dillinger became a folk hero for robbing banks and humiliating the authorities. His luck eventually ran out in July 1934 when he was shot and killed by FBI agents outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. But his legacy as one of history's greatest escape artists lives on. The man escaped from supposedly escape-proof facilities using a fake gun, pure audacity, and absolutely zero FKX about the consequences. The wooden gun he used is now in a museum. The sheriff who posed for that photo probably never lived it down. So there you have it. Prison escapes that sound like they were written by Hollywood screenwriters on acid but actually happened in real life. Spoons and raincoats, helicopters and audacity, mass coordination and fake wooden guns. These people looked at the concept of imprisonment and said, "Nah, I'm good," and then actually made it happen. The truly insane part. For every successful escape we talked about, there were hundreds of failed attempts that ended with prisoners getting shot, captured, or killed. These people beat impossible odds through planning, luck, and sheer force of will. And while we definitely don't condone crime or prison breaks, you can't help but respect the absolute madness of it all. These weren't just escapes. They were middle fingers to the entire concept of secure incarceration. Sweet dreams, and maybe check your walls for spoon marks.